I'm telling this, fully aware that many will dislike me for my actions and the consequences of my betrayal. Reading my own words is disgusting because I know what I did is unforgivable. I understand too well how needlessly tragic the events were. My hope is simply that my story can be shared with anyone in a relationship, and maybe it prevents future betrayals. Specifically, I hope someone cheating or thinking about it might read this and pause. Many might think my example of what can go wrong being unfaithful is a rare occurrence. People more knowledgeable than I am have told me my situation is sadly not unique. But I'm willing to take the hate I'll receive by sharing this if it prevents even one person from breaking a loved one's heart. I'm a 28-year-old woman, married to a wonderful man I'll call William. 8 months ago, he confronted me with proof I'd been emotionally and physically unfaithful. A few days later, he committed self-destruction. Typing those words out has caused people I don't even know to hate me. I couldn't believe I had the capacity to do something so evil, hurting someone I'd loved since childhood. But I did it. If you'd asked either me or William if either of us would ever be unfaithful, we both would have laughed. But to my shock, I allowed myself to lose focus and strayed. I knew it would destroy him if he ever found out. But I took the heart of the man I loved and crushed it so cruelly. He couldn't endure the pain of this life anymore. To those thinking I don't deserve to be breathing, I agree. I've attempted self-destruction twice. I'm convinced there's a reason I'm still here. For now, I've convinced myself that the longer I live, the more I suffer, and I don't deserve the mercy of self-destruction. Honestly, William and I grew up together. I can remember my early youth, and I always knew William. We were in the same Sunday school and public school classes. Our families were friends long before we came along. He always made me laugh. Kids can be mean, but William never was. I realized I thought he was cute in 6th grade, and it became an official crush in high school. William and I were each other's only loves from early high school through college. We were best friends and cherished each other. After graduation, we took a year to get stable jobs near our families and decided to get married. We took vacations together and were ravenous for each other. The only time closeness was off the table was during that time of the month. But we'd make love for hours, beautiful moments of passion. And I threw it all away for something tawdry, cheap, and worthless. We were planning to have children, knew their names, and were both pure. He was my first everything, and I was his. Part of me wishes I could say I had a drunken one-night stand, but no. I got involved with a man inferior to my husband. I didn't even consider the possibility that a friendship with another man could lead to an attachment forming. My husband and I had a strong marriage. As foolish as it sounds now, we really did. My husband was the epitome of strength, and I was the weak one. Before this, I considered myself a strong woman. It's just that no one ever told me that while our relationship was strong, no relationship is bulletproof. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish someone had shot me before anything I did became secretive. It's an indisputable fact the world would be far better with my husband here instead of me. I had many chances to stop it before anything happened, and I had no reason to allow anything to happen. After a brief and heated conversation, he walked out, and I never spoke to him again. I tried to contact him in every way I could think of. I tried so many times just to let him know I'm truly sorry and that I hate what I did. My texts to him never showed anything but an unread status to me, so I doubt he read any emails or heard any voicemails. But everyone said I needed to give him space and time to think. 2 nights after William confronted me at 3:17 a.m., there was a loud knock at the front door. I turned on the lights, thinking it might be someone drunk wanting to curse me out, or worse. Then there was another loud knock, and I quickly put on a hoodie before going to the door. When I opened it and saw 2 policemen, I knew they could be there for many reasons, but I instantly understood why they were there. They told me my husband's body had been found due to an apparent self-destruction, and it devastated me. I dropped to my knees, wailing, tearing at my skin and hair as the police tried to calm me down. When the EMTs arrived, I was sitting on the steps, rocking back and forth, repeating apologies. I couldn't make it to the funeral, even if William's family had allowed my family to attend. I was kept sedated for days. The first thing I wanted to do when I got out was visit William's grave. But nobody knew where his parents had him buried, and that hurt deeply. That night, I attempted self-destruction for the first time. I've now been hospitalized twice for attempted self-destruction. I'm not asking for pity. In fact, I don't want it. Nothing can take away this heartache, and nothing can numb it. Part of me wishes I had somehow forced him to see me, just for a moment, to tell him how sorry I am and that I knew our marriage was over. But I didn't get that. No, I didn't deserve it. I have to face the fact that what I did was so vile that making my husband see me might have forced him to take his life even sooner. Many people have said my actions led him to take his life, and I don't doubt it. Until that horrible day, we were incredibly happy. No self-destruction note verified I caused his passing away. But we had been so happy, loving nearly every moment together. To go from that bliss to grief quickly ended him. I ended him. My words, actions, and thoughts betrayed us both. Regret doesn't damage you. If it did, I would have died before my husband ever confronted me. When COVID hit, William and I quarantined together. I taught at an exclusive private school, and our salary was assured as long as isolation was needed. William worked from home, making progress on a project. Despite the world's worries, we enjoyed our time together, getting closer. I am truly sorry for those who lost a loved one to the horrible disease. But my husband and I grew closer during those weeks. We joked about others struggling with family time. We simply couldn't get enough of each other. After the first month, we agreed to limit arguments to once a day for about a week. Our only argument during quarantine was about doing laundry, just to put clean sheets on the bed again. I cheated on that man, leading him to end his life due to my actions. I hate myself in many ways, but knowing I had it all is the most difficult pill to swallow. My affair with Paul, the lacrosse coach, started innocently during Zoom meetings. No attraction was present. When we met face-to-face, there was zero attraction, at least from me. But I didn't sense any lustful attention from him toward me. During that introduction, I learned he was engaged, and I told him I was happily married. No closeness tension, nothing hinting it would ever be a possibility. The school allowed half the staff and students to attend in person for a week, while the other half used Zoom. The next week they switched. This was to help with social distancing and the students' feelings of isolation. While eating lunch one day before my next class, I got an email from Paul asking me to edit toasts and jokes for his upcoming wedding. I was used to editing, so it was nothing. I felt important enough to tell William, and since it pertained to Paul's wedding, I saw no reason to bore my husband with details about that day. The email included a toast to Paul's parents and to the bride's parents. I took what he said and added a few phrases to tug at the heartstrings of all who attended. The jokes aimed at his brother, who was the best man, were really funny, but a bit too crude for my taste at a wedding. I mentioned this when I sent back his edited speeches. He laughed it off, saying I didn't understand his family's sense of humor, which included teasing. This email exchange marked several months of back-and-forth communication, but surprisingly, nothing inappropriate happened until the very end. Throughout our conversations, there was never any flirting or escalation. We did discuss taxes, but our talks were purely scientific and psychological, making even the biggest nymphomaniac in history drier than the Sahara. The discussions about race, politics, religion, science, and sports sometimes got heated. I was called prudish for my tax opinions, but I enjoyed the discussions, confident there was no temptation on either end. All of this occurred during work hours. My husband and I had a landline for emergencies, and once we were home, our smartphones were turned off. Paul didn't even have my number to text until I emailed him with a witty remark. Late in the day, he asked for my number to counter what I'd sent. Many coworkers had my email, so I didn't think much of it. I genuinely believe Paul had no interest in pursuing me, as he was smitten with his fiancée at the time. However, about a month before their wedding, Paul discovered his girlfriend had been having an affair with her high school boyfriend for over a year. He was shocked and deeply hurt. Unintentionally, I became the person he vented to. I'm not sure when our conversations crossed a line. but I started feeling genuinely sorry for Paul. I despised his fiancée for what she did, and I saw nothing wrong with that. After a particularly tough night for him, he looked frazzled at school, and I could tell he'd been crying. I gave him a hug, and he asked if we could talk after school. Since I had a few hours before William got home, I agreed. In hindsight, I realized what drew me into conversations with Paul was a different opinion. William and I had discussed almost every imaginable topic, and I usually knew his response. Most of the time, I craved surprise or verbal conflict. It was foolish, pathetic, and weak, but that led to the affair. Everything with William was perfect, and we spent every available moment together. I mentioned a coworker named Paul to William, but as nothing was happening, I didn't elaborate, and he saw no reason to pry. When William had to go out of town for 3 weeks, we FaceTimed daily, and I missed him intensely. With sudden spare time, I found myself texting Paul just to pass the time. Instead of occasional conversations, Paul and I often had dinner and drinks before going home. Oddly enough, what led to us becoming physical was me spraining my ankle and the school nurse being unavailable that week. I hurt my ankle and went to Paul, assuming he, as a coach, had numbing spray or an ACE bandage. While he was tending to my ankle, I noticed he had an apparent hardness. I was surprised until I realized he could see slightly up my skirt from his position. For a moment, I found it stimulating that I was turning him on. I adjusted myself to see if a slightly better view would arouse him more. He called me out on it, and I laughed, telling him to work out his frustrations with his girlfriend. Suddenly, he kissed me, and I pushed him away. He kissed me again, and this time I didn't resist. We made out for a few minutes before I snapped out of it, hurriedly left his classroom, and sat in my own classroom in disbelief of what had just happened. I didn't intend for it to happen, and I'm sure Paul didn't either. Unsure whether to call William immediately or wait until he got home that night, I spoke to Paul after classes. He apologized, advised me not to bring conflict into my marriage, and suggested we stay friends. With William out of town and focused on work, I didn't want to add more stress. After discussing Tulsa with William that night, I decided to wait until he got home. His company faced issues, causing delays and extending William's stay by 2 weeks. Paul was there for me to discuss what had happened between us. I couldn't confide in my female friends or family, who all loved William. If I had known, maybe strangers on a site like this would have been the best option. Unfortunately, I vented to the last person I should have. One Friday after work, Paul and I went to a new restaurant for dinner. We sat at the bar, had a few drinks, and I explained my unease about telling my husband. Paul asked how I thought William would take the news, and I suggested he might want to call in sick. The next day, I told William. He asked if I thought he would fight Paul, and I said no. However, I knew it would mean the end of Paul and I talking. Paul confessed he might not have made it through his breakup without me. I assured him I was glad to help and didn't regret it. As the realization that our friendship would end sank in, we both felt a bit depressed. We drank too much, and I ended up at Paul's apartment doing more than kissing. As soon as it was over, guilt set in. Yes, it should have set in earlier, but I knew my marriage was over. William and I had both said society allows too many second chances for those who don't deserve them. While we believe cheaters deserve a second chance, it could never be with the betrayed spouse. Things got complicated when William returned from Tulsa. I was having my period, so I knew there would be no closeness between us. Thankfully, I wouldn't have subjected my husband to diseases, despite wanting to make love to William one last time. I couldn't allow that. I wrote a long letter, confessing what I'd done and planned to give it to William after a face-to-face confession. To this day, I don't know how William discovered what was going on. He may have been monitoring my online conversation with Paul from day one. I never got to ask him how he found out, and the realization that he learned about my betrayal before I could tell him caused me to fall to my knees, swearing I planned to confess. William didn't believe me, and I wouldn't have either. He had a stack of texts between Paul and me printed out, though I didn't deny any of the accusations. That honesty came far too late. He packed a few things and left me on a Monday evening. Wednesday night, he drove to a shopping center, parked his car, and took his own life. Knowing I had destroyed our relationship tortured my soul like never before. Realizing I robbed him of a chance to find someone else to be happy with broke me. The understanding that I didn't just end my relationship with William, but every relationship he had or would have filled me with more guilt than I could ever express. I could discuss everything that has occurred since William's passing, but many details might not interest most people. Simply put, his family and mine hold strong negative feelings towards me. My family remains disgusted by my actions, and their disappointment and shame persist. Their love for me endures, but the sense of disappointment and shame will never fade, and rightly so. The outcomes were not what I intended, but when choices lead to pain and suffering, we bear the guilt of causing that grief. I see a therapist twice a week to work through things. Through my therapist, I met someone genuinely helping me sort through my feelings. Years ago, she intentionally set a small fire as a joke, but it quickly spread, causing multiple endings of life. We've discussed various aspects of her story and mine. Things can't be the way they once were, nor should they. To keep living, I need a plan to make the remaining part of my life as meaningful as possible. So, that's essentially my story. If anyone wants to post hate messages and call me a wretched person, go right ahead. If it helps you release your rage, consider me your verbal punching bag. For those who have been cheated on, some of you may have been intentionally betrayed. But those who had a partner just as perplexed about the cheating as you were, listen to my story. It doesn't justify anything I did. Quite the opposite. But if it helps you understand that you bear little responsibility for the infidelity, so be it. To unrepentant cheaters, I hope you listen to my cautionary tale and recognize your ability to destroy not just someone else, but also your relationships and a significant part of yourself. I know I can't preach or judge anyone but myself. I just hope no one finds their William and loses them or sinks to the depths I did. Most importantly, I want people in great relationships to cherish and never take them for granted. Humans aren't immune to being swayed under the wrong conditions. When we love someone, we carry part of their soul with us. One betrayal makes it impossible for that person to hold that piece of you again. I had my husband's heart in my hands, and now I deserve never to hold it again, nor will he ever hold mine. This life has too much pain without hurting the ones we love. Love is too precious to risk on anything. Update. I cheated, causing my husband to commit self-destruction days after confronting me. This is intended as a final response. William likely didn't read it, and considering he's been dead a year, I doubt it was him. For those trying to psychoanalyze me, I appreciate the effort, even if it was for your own self-interests. Professionals haven't provided a good theory for why I let things happen. I feel like there should be some valid reason why I did what I did too. I just can't come up with one, and it wouldn't be a valid reason if I found one. For those thinking this is fake, I can't fathom a reason to post this other than to warn and perhaps help. It wasn't a karma grab. I've barely responded, so it wasn't for attention, and it certainly wasn't to lift my spirits because I've rightfully been slammed for my betrayal. Admitting to something horrible is not easy. Imagining it never happened doesn't help me, but you all do. I do not keep in contact with Paul, and have not heard from him since before William committed self-destruction. The only things I know about him are secondhand from people I worked with. I have no interest in being with Paul or having him in my life in any way. So those thinking I planned my vile actions to ride off into the sunset with a first-year lacrosse coach? No, bless you all. May you have stellar lives full of happiness, but most of all, peace.
I was married to my wife for 4 years, and our marriage faced challenges due to her struggle with drinks. Even before we tied the knot, I knew she enjoyed drinking, particularly at parties. She was the kind of person who loved to indulge in drinks during social events. We first met at a club where she and her friends were celebrating a birthday. I was instantly attracted to her and approached her in the group. That night, we talked and spent the rest of the evening at the club. After meeting, we went home together because she asked if she could come with me. On that first night, we became faithful. Despite my wife thinking I was only interested in a one-night stand, I felt differently. I genuinely liked her, and our closeness deepened my feelings for her in the following weeks. We started dating after spending time together at least twice a week for 3 months. At the time, she had just finished college and was working hourly jobs until she could land her desired job. Early on, I knew she had a drinking issue, but I didn't expect it to escalate to the point of needing rehab after over a year of dating. We got married, officially moved in together, and unfortunately, a year later, she lost her parents and only sibling in a tragic accident. This intensified her emotional struggle, leading her to cope with the pain through excessive drinking. I thought her extreme drinking might be a temporary response to mourning, but it persisted. Months after the burial, she didn't recover from her family's loss, becoming a shadow of her former self. Despite my efforts to comfort her, she was in a dark mental state. Around the same time, she experienced a breakdown, adding to her emotional turmoil. She stopped working, and the responsibility of caring for both of us fell on me. On days when she wasn't drinking, she displayed aggression and anger over trivial matters. I walked in on my wife making out with a neighbor, and I was really angry. She was drunk, but he seemed sober. I kept the neighbor away and informed his wife, yet I couldn't take any action against my wife, thinking she wasn't in the right state of mind. I was wrong because a few days later, I caught her talking to the same neighbor. When she saw me, she immediately walked away. Meanwhile, her drinking problem worsened. If I gave her money, she'd spend it all on drinks, reaching a point where she couldn't go a day without drinking. I got frustrated and tired of putting up with her, handling bills alone and still caring for her. It became overwhelming, so I decided to get her help when there was no other option. I informed her I was taking her to rehab, and after several months of persuasion, she finally went. Seeing a significant improvement, I was relieved to be getting my wife back. As a concerned husband, I finally found peace as she broke free from her bad habits and started rebuilding her life. However, my relief didn't last. One day, while enjoying YouTube at home, my wife announced she was marrying the love of her life. I didn't take it seriously at first and just laughed it off. But when she mentioned her rehab coach, Ryan, I became attentive. According to her, Ryan was the one for her, and they were in love, planning to get married. She praised him for treating her well, talking nicely, and more. I was shocked and knew she was going crazy. The Ryan she talked about was already a married man with 2 kids, making no sense. I was sure she didn't come up with the marriage idea on her own, so I confronted Ryan on her next meeting day. When I shared everything my wife said, Ryan said she was delusional. Somehow, my wife had overheard his responses. She had been eavesdropping on her conversation. Upon hearing him, she left her hiding spot, tears streaming from her eyes. She sobbed like a baby and simultaneously showed me a video of her and Ryan, both with nothing on in bed and the bathroom. Ryan had recorded it during their last hotel encounter and sent it to her. She claimed Ryan vowed to divorce his wife so they could marry. When she presented the video, Ryan, angered, berated her, calling her foolish for thinking he'd leave his wife for an unstable woman. His words shattered her heart. I'd never seen my wife cry like that since losing her family. It became clear she truly loved Ryan, even planning to divorce me for him, which deeply saddened me. I was furious with Ryan for exploiting my wife, his client. To give him a taste of his own medicine, I pressed charges using the video as evidence in court. Sharing this is easy because the hurt and heartbreak almost shattered me. Despite the challenges my wife presented, I still loved her and tried to help her return to normal. Unfortunately, she cheated on me in return, planning to divorce me for her rehab coach. I felt pity for her when she discovered Ryan's deceit and nearly fell into depression. Out of compassion, I admitted her to a mental hospital, and after her admission, I initiated a divorce. Although it seemed she wasn't in her right state of mind, she was clear-headed enough to consider divorcing me. Honestly, our relationship was a significant waste of time, resources, and emotions, but I'll view it as a life lesson. Here's a piece of free advice. Some women aren't worth the sacrifices most men make. Even if you give them the universe, they might still find an excuse to cheat. Regarding Ryan, I won the court case, and he received a jail term for exploiting his mentally unstable client. The government also shut down his business. I often miss my wife, but I won't let her problems excuse breaking our marital vows and cheating on me.